Hey guys, I was reminded today that I had not finished some of my map guides. So I want to continue on the map guides this week and start off with Tomb of the Spider Queen. So Tomb of the Spider Queen is one of my favorite maps. It just is a really interesting map. It seems to go back and forth, and it's a map that commonly gets to level 20, which is why it has a really strong roster, or hero variety, I would say, because there's a lot more heroes that can get value off of it. So to speak of Tomb of the Spider Queen, what is this map? This map is a map where there is an objective that you need to collect little gems that drop from the spiders, which are the ranged minions in every lane. So every wave that shows up, you can get 3 gems, and there are 3 different lanes on this map, which means that you can get effectively 9 gems for your team every 30 seconds. As this map goes on, once one team gets 50 gems, you can turn in those gems and summon spiders that appear in all 3 lanes. The spiders will push all the way up until the first enemy minions that they find. If there's no enemy minions before they find a structure, then they will stop at the nearest enemy structure, with the exception that it can't be a fountain. If there's a fountain available here but everything else is destroyed, they will continue on until they see either more minions or another structure. In general, this objective can be pretty strong because it pushes in all 3 lanes at once. However, because the lanes on this map are very, very close to each other, probably closer than many other maps around, what you'll notice is that you can usually deal with all 3 of these pretty reasonably. Not just that, but they do also decay in health, which makes it to where if you focus primarily on one lane and then you kind of deal with that one, and then you go to the mid lane and deal with it, the bottom one, even if you weren't there, likely will be down to half health, even though no one on your team even damaged it. So it is a pretty interesting map. The other thing that's cool is if one team turns in the 50 gems, you don't lose the gems on your other team. So as long as you're playing safe, you can still turn in right afterwards, which is why this map tends to go back and forth a lot. As one team will turn in, get a little bit of an advantage, the other team will turn in and kind of even out the game, and then it just keeps going back and forth like that. You can kill anyone who's holding gems for them to drop their gems. The gems will then disappear after about 5 to 10 seconds of sitting out there. I don't know the exact number. So your team needs to pick up those gems very quickly, or else they will lose them. There are 3 basic camps on this map, as well as a boss. The camps are 2 bruiser camps, 1 on each side. Very difficult to invade these camps. They are primarily just to be picked up by your team. 1 neutral siege camp that can be picked up from either side, usually put in the solo lane. And then 1 boss that is on the top who doesn't summon or doesn't spawn until a little bit after the objective starts. In general, this boss is also the same boss that is used on Sky Temple. It's the one that summons Little Tornado. And the bruiser camps are just basic bruiser camps. The siege camps are just basic siege camps. They just look visually a little bit different from the ones that might be on some of the other maps. However, they do act about the same. Going on to that, what is the strategy on this map? To talk a little bit about the strategy, the first thing that you want to know is the best strategy for this map is to have a 4-man rotation. To have 4 people in a specific lane, which allows you a good chance of taking out people very, very quickly. And then it also gives you a good chance at picking up as many gems as you possibly need, and then moving to another lane with all 4 people, and then grabbing all the gems in this other lane. This also gives you power over one of the turn-in locations. If you're constantly moving as 4 and constantly getting kills from lane to lane to lane, then you'll notice that you also have control over the turn-in, and it's very easy to get a turn-in whenever you want to. Sometimes getting a sneaky turn-in is a little bit better, as it allows you to kind of push out in another direction, and it's just a really powerful way of getting a lot of the gems and a lot of the pressure. Rotating as 4 also makes it easy to gank and get kills. As you saw earlier, we came down, we got a kill, and then we would normally move back up, but in this case we have a turn-in, so we're going to put pressure more on the other lanes to get the turn-in, and we might sneak around and have one person try to turn in top while one person tries to turn in bottom lane. These are easy ways to get these turn-ins. So the strategy in the beginning should be a 4-man rotating from mid to top. You will normally want a decent amount of wave clear so that you can clear up the lane quickly and rotate faster than the enemies. Some other heroes that are really nice, which we'll talk about the heroes that are best on this map a little bit later, but some of the other heroes that are nice are heroes who have ways to pick off enemies. Someone like a Kerrigan who can kill someone during a rotation. The solo lane is probably one of the most least important out of all the maps, purely because it's so easy for people to rotate down and catch this wave. You almost don't need a dedicated solo laner. However, it's still nice to have a dedicated solo laner, and especially someone with a lot of wave clear, because if your team decides to just send everyone top to push, it's nice to have a solo laner who can double soak for your team, keeping up the experience contributed, and in general, it's just a very powerful technique. What are some of the strategies to win this map? I've talked about some of the strategies for the rotations as well as how you should be playing, but there is a specific strategy for winning this map that a lot of people don't utilize, and that's utilizing the camps at the right times. And what do I mean by that? Well, the camps that you'll be using during this map are camps that are very easy to pick up if you have people that are already turning in. So the camps disappear, as you see right now. The camps disappear during the objectives. Right as you turn in and the objectives start spawning, from the time the last objective's health is there, all the camps disappear. When the objective dies, the camps will respawn as well as the boss. Now, how do you take this objective and actually be very effective with it? Well, the first thing that I always recommend is put pressure on top lane, as top lane is the boss lane, and if you can put pressure on top lane, it's going to make it to where the enemies are always trying to worry about top lane, and there's always the pressure of a boss appearing. That's the first and most important thing that you should be doing, is always putting pressure on top lane. This gives you a higher chance of ending the game early, as the boss will likely get the front walls and a decent chunk of their keep, as long as you can destroy their first fort. Now, if you can destroy the first fort and the front walls here, the boss is pretty much guaranteed to get a keep if you can get it, meaning that if the enemies go for a turn-in, you could quickly go for a boss, grab it, kill their turn-in, and then leave the boss to go take their keep as you clean up the rest of the objective. So it's a great defensive play if you've already set up pressure on the top lane to go for the boss at a certain point. The other really powerful things to do, and this is one thing that I actually thought was kind of strange about this game, is I don't really like getting an objective when you're down level 10s, because then you can't push with it at all, because you're always worried that the enemies are going to aggressively use their level 10s, and it makes it very difficult for you to push at all. All of the objectives just get cleared up quickly, and you don't even get that much soak because you're too afraid to push with your objectives because of 10s, so you actually kind of screw yourself. Oftentimes when you're down 10s, you usually just want to get all the camps you can get soak in all three lanes, playing as safe as possible, and then right as you hit level 10 to turn in as much as you can, because once you have all the camps and you're pushing, the enemies are going to be distracted by the camps, and you should be able to turn in for free. I highly recommend doing that whenever you're on this map and trying to hit level 10. After that, once you have the capabilities of level 10 and you have the camps available, you can get that turn in and actually get a lot done. Some other strategy that's hasn't been mentioned yet that I highly recommend is the strategy of utilizing the camps during turn-ins. When you know that the enemy's about to turn in, picking up a camp very quickly, or at least starting a camp for the turn-in, is very effective at dealing with the turn-in, as it allows you to have this giant wave pushing, so you can kind of ignore the turn-in as your camp and wave deals with the turn-in. Then you can go into other lanes and you can deal with the turn-in in other lanes as your camps are dealing with them. So on defensive, utilizing camps is very important. On the offense side of it, using camps is also important. If there are camps available while you've gotten a couple kills, it's a very good time to start one of those camps as you're getting the last person to turn in, because then you'll have the camp pushing as well as you'll have the objective pushing. One of the common things that we'll try to do whenever I'm playing in a coordinated team is we will have one person turn in and then start the camp, and then everyone else turn in, and the whole team will go over and do the camp, and then sometimes they'll kind of step away from the turn in, making it to where when the objective starts pushing in to right about here, then they'll pick up the camp. So the objective spawns here, the camp will show up here, and you can push with all 5 of the minions and the summon from the from the objective, and it's just this powerful push that just keeps going in, destroying everything. You'll have the spell armor, you'll have the objective pushing, and they won't be able to deal with it at all. If you see the chat, we're all friends here. We're all just messing around with each other. So if you see us calling out each other, it's more just for fun. Generally, getting just these blank objectives is okay, but it gets very difficult if you're not like a level ahead of the enemy, or if you don't have any sort of advantage. The objectives can usually be cleared up by a team with a decent amount of wave clear. So it gets a little weird to try to push too far ahead with those. So now that we've talked a little bit about the strategy of utilizing the boss or the camps with the objectives, or against the objectives to mitigate these, we've talked about the strategy of making sure that you're not turning in while you're down too much, because you might just lose out on different things. We've talked about the strategy of focusing on top lane first, because it is more likely to destroy or set up for the boss lane. Then we've also talked about trading a boss while the enemies take a turn in, or if you get a lot of kills, you can go for a boss and a turn in at the same time, which is pretty much game ending. Now, what are the people that work out well on this map? What is the drafts that you should be looking for? Who should you be playing, and who thrives on this map? Well, to start off, some of my favorite heroes on this map, I usually put the main priority on having a good 4-man rotation. People who have a lot of wave clear, people who thrive in catching people off guard when doing these rotations. I don't focus heavily on poke, but poke is kind of nice to be able to stop the turn-ins, but honestly, I don't focus on it because you can be a lot closer to these turn-ins than most other lanes, and there's so many different directions that you can poke from, so I don't usually worry too much about poke. It's heavily on wave clear, rotations, getting picks during rotations. So as far as the tanks, I like people like Joanna, who can scoop up the minions and have your team blow up the minions quickly as Joanna. I like Diablo, as Diablo can catch people in these rotations. People like Stitches has the wave clear and the ability to pick people in rotations. Murden's really nice. There's a lot of walls you can go through. He's great at picking people in rotations. However, his wave clear is a little bit low. For the support side of things, really just picking the majority of the strong supports are good, but if you find yourself lacking wave clear, Alex Strauss is okay to catch for that, but in general, I don't really like her because there's no perfect time to dragon, as if you dragon once, people walk away and then they just go turn in someplace else. Rhaegar is pretty good as he brings on the wave clear if you're lacking the wave clear, and he does also do well at picking people off during rotations. People like Whitemane, Deckard are always still strong picks in the support lane. Mages are usually pretty good if you have someone like a Kilthos or a Jaina to clear up very quickly. Checking the boss is always pretty common. After level 13, if you see a lot of people go missing, you should always be checking for the boss. Usually it's easiest just throw an ability to check this bush, because someone's always going to be in there if they are doing the bush. The camps can also be used as a distraction, which we've done every once in a while, where we'll pick up a camp, we'll send in the camp, and then we'll go immediately into just turning in. But generally, what you want to be focusing on when drafting for this map is wave clear, wave clear, wave clear. The solo lane, in my opinion, this is one of the least important maps for a solo lane, purely because the solo lane is so close to the rest of the team that it doesn't really matter. You can have a solo lane, and you definitely should have a solo lane, but just about anyone can cover the solo lane for a long period of time. So if you are going to have a solo lane, what I would recommend is having someone with a lot of wave clear. As I said earlier, you can have your solo laner cover 2 different lanes as your team is putting pressure on a top, trying to clear this up for a boss, a potential boss. When trying to close out this game, the main thing that you want to focus on is the boss as well as the objectives. Trying to pressure for a boss is very, very important. You can see both teams have already cleared up the top lane as boss pressure, as it gives them a win condition. Now it really comes down to getting just an experience lead, getting any sort of advantage, getting a couple kills, and then doing a boss and a turn-in to try to finish up a keep. Once you have the keeps on this map, again, the lanes are so close to each other that keeps usually aren't that powerful, as the majority of the time the keeps don't really lead to too much. Because you can usually just kind of push through this and then boom, you're right next to the lane anyways. So dealing with the catapults, and most people draft a lot of wave clear on this map, so in general it's not that powerful to grab a keep as the wave clear is usually already there. Ragnaros is a decent pick on this map because if you use your trait in the middle lane and your bottom and top have already pushed in a bit, you are actually in range to clear up these as well. So you can clear up these with your abilities, and with whatever you have left over, you can throw some damage into the bottom or the top lane. So his trait gets a ton of value when you were losing the objective, and in fact there was a pro strategy to use Ragnaros and Nazebo on this map so that Ragnaros could defend until you hit level 20, and Nazebo could double soak and finish his trait very early, so that when you reach the late game of the map, you would be in a very good position, as your Nazebo would be completely stacked up and your Ragnaros would have his level 20 advantage as well, as he could just keep using trait over and over and over. So it would take a long time to try to beat you, and the Nazebo just keeps stacking endlessly, getting unkillable and getting so much damage. Generally, there are a lot of different mini strategies to this map, but I really focus primarily on the wave clear aspect, as well as the rotations. As long as you have good rotations and wave clear, your team is likely going to have such an advantage it's going to be hard to come back from. However, this is a map that usually gets to level 20, it's a map that lasts a long time, and it's a map that's very hard to finish out because every time you get a turn in, usually the enemies get a turn in. So getting rid of the enemy gems is huge, because if one team gets a double turn in where they turn in twice in a row, like this right here, it's very, very hard to come back from. Or sorry, it's been back and forth still, but if one team could get a double turn-in, it gets very, very hard to come back from. So if during one of your turn-ins you can get rid of a lot of the enemy gems, you're going to be in a really good spot. Really, the double turn-in or a boss turn-in is the way to really end this game, and coming down to one of those two things is usually how this game ends off. To end this map, you really only need one keep down. There's nothing special. You don't need to have like 2 keeps to make sure that you end. You don't need to get a keep in 2 side lanes and trick them. There's not a lot of like having the minions on this map. It usually comes down to just getting one good fight and pushing down to end the game. But in general, fights get kind of chaotic because there's really tight areas, and that's one of the things that I like about this map is it has a really wide roster pool. This map usually gets to level 20. It has fights that are in open areas and fights that are in clustered areas, which means you can use a lot of heroes that you normally wouldn't see, and it's just a really powerful tool. So right here is kind of what I was talking about. You go for a turn-in, and you have everyone go for the boss, and then you can send off one person to go back and turn in the rest of the coins, or gems, or whatever you want to call them. I believe Pallytime calls them spider butts because they are the gems that look like the butts of the spider, so I guess technically they are spider butts. And so this is what I was talking about. This is how you end off the game. You get a boss at the same time that you have an objective pushing in. The enemies are playing this out really well by getting the camps to counteract the objective. So in this case, we have a pretty good fight for both teams. Both teams are using the strategies of the map. So pretty much blue team doesn't need to worry about the mid lane nor the bot lane, purely because they got camps to deal with the objectives that are pushing. Red team is purely going to work primarily on this strategy of the boss and the turn-in at the same exact time, making it to where they can push heavily. As this boss is going to take the majority of the hits, the objective is going to stay alive for the majority of the time. Both teams play to the strategy of the map, but a boss plus turn-in is almost always a victory. It is so hard to deal with both of these health pools before they take out your keep, before they take out your core, while the red team can pretty much just be focusing on kills the entire time that this is pushing until it gets in here, and now it's almost impossible to defend. So when you want to end out the game, this is either a double turn-in in a row or a turn-in with a boss is pretty much all you have to do to end out the game on this map. Thank you all for watching, and hopefully you learned the best strategies for utilizing in Tomb of the Spider Queen, and hopefully this helped you out for drafting on this map as well as utilizing all of the tools that are available on this map. It's a very common map to see in pro play, so if you were ever watching HGC, you're likely going to be seeing this map a few times, so if you want to know more strategies or unique aspects of this map, you can feel free to check it out by watching some HGC. In fact, there's one HGC game I don't have the link for it, but if someone does have the link, toss in the comments below. There was an HCC game where someone used Phoenix, and they used Planet Cracker and aimed themselves in a way where they could Planet Cracker through 3 pieces of the objective and completely ended the entire objective with a single planet cracker. So if you ever want to try some gimmick like that with your team league group, you can always do that. Feel free to check out some new stuff, but as always, I would recommend checking out the HEC. Finally, thank you all for watching. Feel free to check out my other videos. Thank you again for watching.